Welcome to the Go Time Podcast. Go Time Podcast with your host, Todd Martin.
Welcome back to the Go Time Podcast. We have Scot, Estep. Is that how you pronounce your name? Estep?
Estep, yes.
So I don't want to screw up what your title exactly is, because I'm like, what does he do? It's like an animal morgue kind of, like, I don't know what do you. So what is officially the title?
So I'm a veterinary pathologist. And that's, I went to veterinary school, spent 20 years a cow doctor, then 20 years in the Army, and then the Army sent me to pathology training. So it's 3 more years of school to be like a board certified veterinary pathologist.
Really? So you got the board certified pathologist part while you were in the military.
Yes.
And you spent 20 years in there?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So what was their purpose in sending you off to go and do that for?
Well, the military does a lot of research, animal research, like particularly like a couple of the jobs that I had, like when we invaded Iraq and they were collecting all of the soil samples and sending them back for testing. That was at the Institute of Chemical Research, where we are in Institute of Chemical Defense Research. So that's where, so there are lots of different risk agents that the government's worried about. That testing is done in like guinea pigs primarily.
Yeah.
And so whenever the studies are done, the pathologist actually does the autopsies on the animals and looks at the slides and said, this did something different. So we kind of assess that. So we're, most of the research in the military is done on animals. As a veterinarian, I kind of am a two-sided, because I kind of make sure the animals are taken well care of, make sure that they're not wasted, that and that their pain control is done right. So I'm a veterinarian first, but then when the study's over, then I'm making sure that, or evaluating the tissues and seeing what a different product did and what it didn't do.
Wow, that's a trip. Huh. So is there much of a reason for like a veterinarian in the civilian life to go to learn learn pathology? Well,
most veterinary pathologists, and probably about 50-50, about half of them work in research. So all of the, even like the COVID-19 vaccine research all started in a monkey model. And so about half of the people who are pathologists do medical research. And then the other half do diagnostic work. So they'll do, you cut a tumor off of your dog and, at the veterinary clinic, they send it to the lab for testing. Then it's evaluated by a veterinary pathologist. So,
that makes sense.
I kind of swim in the middle. I still, when I retired from the military where I did research, I started a diagnostic pathology company. And so I do, pet biopsies as well as animal autopsies and figuring out why animals die. Even like this morning, the Austin police brought me a dog that was potentially, animal cruelty case. And so, so I do kind of everything from kind of animal cruelty to even herd health. If you have a bunch of cows and one of them dies, if you're worried about your other cows, you need, they do autopsies for that. So
I just never thought about there being a specialist in that field. Like, I guess it just never dawned on me that there would be, to go that route. And I think that's probably one of the most fascinating thing about jobs. Like, I love jobs. Yeah. I love learning about different people's jobs and stuff. And mostly because I always like hearing the stories about what made you go that route? Like, I didn't even know that existed, right? And growing up as a kid, I liked animals. I liked horses and doing that kind of stuff. But I had no idea that people would pay you to ride horses, And then whenever I found out that you could actually make a living doing it, it was like just a mind blow. And then horse show and then everything else. And so it just kind of like opened a whole new world to me. And I was always the kid that walked, that there wasn't a whole lot of people that lived around us. And then when I go to town, and I remember telling my wife one time we went up and visit her up in her family up in Dallas. And I was just amazed at the number of houses. And all I could think of was like, what do all these people do? Like, is there that many jobs around to like employ all those people? And so just the vast array of jobs, you know, really always is interesting to me. And then there's so many different facets of what a veterinary pathologist, and like I didn't even think about that. I would have thought that most of if you're doing like studying disease or something, that you would have a medical doctor, you know, a human pathologist that would be doing that. But it makes sense that you would need a veterinarian to be doing it.
Yeah, even human pathologists are so incredibly specialized to one species, and so. You know, there's the difference between dogs and cats and horses, and it's even funny when they write, you know, veterinary books, they'll write, you know, pathology of dogs and cats. But truth is, dogs and cats are like completely unrelated. There's more things that have cats are like horses. They should write, you know, tumors of cats and horses, because a lot of them are similar. It's very interesting that the cat actually has a lot of the same stuff as a horse does. So, you know, it's very diverse, you know. And
that is really wild that a cat and a horse have more things in common.
Yeah, certainly more than a dog and a cat. So it really does make for, you know, and certainly there are some human pathologists who, you know, MD pathologists who will kind of do some diagnostic stuff and things. But it's, in human medicine, it's great because they can say, well, we looked at 100,000 of these mammary tumors that were like this cell type, and we know that, you know, that they lived this many years afterwards, and this treatment worked. And, you know, in veterinary medicine, there's just like so many different species, and there's like, it's hard to control it, and they're not all treated. And so they have very specific knowledge on every single tumor. But then when you're talking about different species, it's just, you know, it's out the door.
So it opens a can of
so
worms.
Completely different. Yeah. And you can't even say, even the same tumor in two different animals has a totally different behavior. So you can't you can't really just say, oh, well, it's a mast cell tumor, which is kind of the tumors that make when you get stung by, or the cells when you get stung by a bee and it all swells up. That's because these mast cells are in your skin. So sometimes those mast cells turn into a tumor. And in a dog, they can be really bad. In cats, they'll even go away on their own sometimes. So, you know, it's just completely different tumors.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, what do you stick to a certain species that you do your pathology work on?
I do absolutely everything. I try not to do fish. I say me doing fish is malpractice. So I try not to do fish. I do some snakes because I do a lot of zoo animal support.
Right.
And in fact, like 3 weeks ago, I did an autopsy on an elephant, you know, here in San Antonio.
Oh, really?
And so it really everything, but vast majority of what I do is dogs and cats, just because that's what the pet population is.
So on the zoo part, do you see a difference in like tumors or the presence of some of those things in those animals that are in captivity versus the ones that are not?
Well, yes, you do, but it's a weird thing because you see tumors in captive animals, but like per se, this elephant that I did the autopsy on was 52 years old.
Wow.
In captivity, you know, 45 is old, so this one was really old. In the wild, if they live 35 years, that's a long time. And so what happens with a lot of zoo animals is they may live twice the normal lifespan. So you see a lot of tumors, you know, you can have a 50-year-old hippopotamus that might have a tumor, but in the wild, it would have never made it to 50. So it's not really that there's more tumors because they're in captivity. They just live longer, you know. In the wild, you show weakness, you get eaten.
Yeah, there's not much of a threat.
Right. And so any kind of cancer, any kind of a foot infection, and you die in the wild.
Right.
So the animals in captivity have a much longer lifespan, so they do get more cancer. But it's just like we get, you know, the older we get, the bigger the chance we have it. So.
Yeah. Huh. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So do you have like a weirdest case that you ever handled?
weirdest. I've done a lot of weird stuff. I've had some really cool cases. I mean, like when I was in the residency, there was the panda, Ling Ling and Sing Sing. The Sing Sing was given to Reagan, to Nixon by the ruler of China. Yeah. You know, and when it was given to Nixon, yeah. So when it died, I did the autopsy on that one, yeah. So that was just, it's probably the highest profile animal that I've done, and I've done a couple of shamus and a lot of the.
Oh, that's got to be wild.
It's a trip, yeah.
That's got to be really wild. So, like, there's not a whole lot of reference to.
Well, and other than there are similarities in all of those things, and so it is really cool though. The people, like for the whales from SeaWorld, they actually went to up with the Inuit Indians and learned how they like actually cut a whale up for like eating and food processing and things. And so so they kind of introduced me to this kind of system. They just kind of make a grid of like 24-inch squares, and that's about 50 pounds, with the 8-inch blubber and everything. You just cut the skin and you just kind of take the grid off, and then you're able to get down to the other tissues. But then whales have almost nothing. They have no gut system at all, hardly, because they just eat straight protein. They're just eating fish and straight protein, and so they don't have like cows and horses with this super long intestines for making grass into nutrients.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, so is that mostly the like mammal fish? I got the better term.
Marine mammals.
Marine mammals.
It is in. I mean, it's kind of a thing that goes across all species. You can kind of look at, say, a tiger, which is carnivore, strict carnivore, and they have fairly short, small intestine and kind of a simple gut system. And so mostly what you see is muscle. When you look at them, it's frame and muscle and not a lot of GI system. Whereas you look at a cow, and they're all GI system because they're taking the worst forage possible and making it into protein. So.
Oh, wow.
And so it's the same thing. You can go into, if you look at a fish that only really eats like grasses and things like that, they have a different, more developed GI system than, say, a fish that only eats other fish. So it's kind of across all species.
Huh. I never even considered that.
Yeah.
That's something I've not thought of.
There's a lot. It's one of my favorite things is kind of the comparative anatomy thing, and like I really like eyeballs, and so I do a lot of ocular pathology, and so you think, okay, like an eagle, is going to have this like unreal, eye because they can see, so that you can look at the layers of their retina and see kind of how developed their eye is. And so you can kind of say, you see that, okay, this animal had like really keen eyesight, and they even actually have an extra structure in their eye because when they're dropping from high altitude, they're dropping in like at super high speeds, just the pressure change and everything else can like mess with your vision, and so they're doing it in such few seconds. So they have an extra vessel that runs through the middle of their eye to supply their eye with oxygen while they're
counter the balance of like the G-force, or is it because
the force and just the speed and the wind and everything else?
I never thought about that. If they're diving that fast and that much wind coming into their eye, it would have to distort their lens too.
Yeah, and so they have these really cool structures that kind of help their eye work. But then you look at like a prairie dog. And you think, well, a prairie dog lives under the ground, and so prairie dog would have a simple eye, you would think, except for prairie dogs get eaten by eagles. And so if you look at the retina of a prairie dog, it almost looks exactly the same as the eagle or, a hawk because they need to be able to see that eagle that's way up there in the sky. And so it's really kind of cool that sometimes the prey and the predator actually have like equal tools. It's like a fair fight.
I would never thought about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff.
That is really cool. Well, the eye is such a fascinating organ, period.
It is, yeah.
That's a really cool one. Yeah. I mean, just to think about what all it does and what, the signal that it sends and how we even know what we're seeing baffles your mind, right? I mean, like, I've often thought, like, do I really see you the way you think you see you? And, because like it's just what my brain interprets of what I see,
what
right?
really is blue. It's
exactly.
what everybody always told you is blue, which is what you see, but who knows that's really the same thing.
That's got to be. And then until, like my son, who's, there's a couple of colors that he can't see until he's, we're talking to him and you're like, it's, I think it's green or blue, one of those. Yeah. But he's, has a hard time seeing. I'm like, how do you not see that? Oh, he can't see that color. And then you're like, I wonder why. Yeah. And to talk to him about it, it's kind of wild to see what he sees whenever he sees it.
Right.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So when have you used that? When, like, have you had the opportunity to use that to, I don't know, to diagnose anything on the eye?
No, not so much. I mean, it kind of does help a little bit when you're looking at a bunch of different species to kind of think about what you might expect in that species, because, so how do you know if the retina is atrophied because of disease, or if that's what a retina looks like in an elephant, so because their eyes are in an elephant are fairly simple, and so they don't have like unreal eyesight. Why do they need it? Who's going to sneak up on them? What does it matter? And so there are so you can kind of say, okay, a cow can't run that fast, it can't, so really what good is their vision? So that you can kind of expect that herbivore eyes are going to look about like this. So if you do see one that's like, oh, those layers look really thin, so you can say, oh, this is an ocular disease, something has happened in this eye.
So I'm curious about the difference in the eyes of a, like, say, a herbivore versus a carnivore, like that have them facing in the front, and how they see, and then having them on the sides of their heads, like the process of that. Like, that's always fascinating. Well, because I train horses.
Right.
Something kind of pertinent.
And that is an interesting thing, you say how we kind of put humanness on everything. So just like you think you see how the colors like your son does, but he doesn't. Imagine that horses almost have like two totally different images. We have one image, right? And they're really watching two TV screens at all times, like two computer screens. Because it's barely even blended together.
Exactly. Yeah. So then what? And then so if you're not a horse person, that whenever you're training and you're teaching a horse, one of the things that you have to do when you're training and teaching a horse is you have to teach one side, and then when you get everything taught on the left side, or whatever it is that you want to teach, teaching something for the day on the left side, you have to train the right side completely independent, because it oddly enough, from the left side they interpret nothing that's on the right, so it has to be retaught and taught along on the right, so they can get really left brain, right brain, when they're working. And so do you see anything different in the herbivore eye, or the predator eye versus the prey eye?
No, other than just like I said, in the eagles, they have the extravascular structures just to kind of to adapt to their situation. But as far as, and even how that interacts with the brain and stuff, it all mostly seems the same. I mean, I haven't gone into it to that depth. So
yeah, I was just, that's kind of wild to figure out, to just contemplate that.
I mean,
right?
And other structures are like that too. I mean, the teeth are very similar as well. So I can actually have a set of different skulls that I've cleaned and collected over the years, and I'll take them to the grade school, right, and show them, comparative, dentistry. And so you could take like the teeth of a tiger, these big fangs and these scissor-like, molars. Their molars are all more like scissors than they are grinders. And you can take, the head of a deer and show that they have just these scissor, the blades in front for the scissoring the grass, but then everything back here's all grinders. And so then you can take a monkey. Well, some monkeys eat plants and some monkeys eat other monkeys and snakes and things. And so you can show, and just show the, kids the teeth. You're like, so what does this animal eat? And if they've got big fangs and scissory teeth, you can say, okay, this is probably a carnivore. It eats snakes and other monkeys and things, versus the other one, no fangs at all, complete grinders, and so you can tell that monkey is a plant only monkey, so you can look at, it really, all the anatomy really speaks to the purpose of the animal, what it does.
Yeah, that is always really kind of cool. So Is there any other species that has an interdental gap like the horse does?
I don't know that.
Huh. I never thought about it. Just made me think about the teeth.
Yeah.
And the way that they work. Huh. That's kind of wild. I just wondered about that. Huh. Yeah, that's kind of the way that the teeth, because before we, in years past, we didn't really float teeth. And so we had a different style, or you kind of went through a different regimen of bits and bridles and stuff. Then we would do the snaffle bit, and then we'd go from a snaffle bit to a hackmore. And the whole purpose and behind using the hackmore was that we would get out of the mouth while the teeth are changing, and while they're shedding teeth. And so between that into the 2-3-year-old to like 5. When they were shedding those sets of molars and those front teeth and stuff, we got out of it, and you worked off of the nerves that run along the mandibular bone,
Right.
And you'd work that, and you teach your horse how to use and work with that, and then you go introduce the bridle, and you do with like a double bridle where you do a hackmore and a bridle and work that, and then move into your bridle.
Yeah.
And bridle work. But that was the whole purpose in doing all that, was to get out of the mouth while all that was changing. And now there's a lot more of.
My favorite, and it's a lot because the horses that I used to work on in college, my objective was selling them as kid horses.
Yeah.
And so I always only used a Bosal, because with the Bosalia, I was able to basically make a horse that you could ride just as well with a halter on as a bit. I just found too many kids pulling on the bit too much, irritating the horse and stuff. And so I really liked to teach a horse to be very supple in the face off of the Bosal. And then when the kids would come out to ride them, I'd just say, here, just wrap the lead rope around and throw them on bareback, and they could ride them around and lope them and trot them and everything, and then they sell. Immediately because they had just had such a supple face, and that's what I find that kids do so badly, is just they're working that bit too much, and the horse gets irritated.
That's the fastest way to untrain anything, is put your kids with them.
Yeah, that's true.
So do you now you work as your own independent so do you do most of your field work? Do you do most of the work in the field, or do you have pathology lab at your house?
So there is a kind of a process in pathology where it takes a lot of chemicals and machines and all of that stuff. So just to go from a piece of tissue to a slide that's stained that I can look at on a microscope. And so there's a commercial lab in town, this human pathology lab that takes them and goes from the tissue to the slide for me.
Oh.
And that's just, I retired from the military in 2013 and loved the military. They gave me so much, and I still feel a great debt to the military.
Yeah.
But they also, when I got out, I really didn't want to have a bunch of people working for me, and I just wanted to be as simple as can be. So my company, I have like 6 pathologists who work for me, some full-time, some part-time, but they're all just contractors. So I really have no employees, and I have no managerial really responsibility other than, hey, I gave you that case, where's the report? That's it. And I don't even have to do that, because that's fairly simple. So So by having a commercial lab make my slides for me, then I don't have to have somebody to answer the phone, and somebody to receive the tissues, and somebody to process them and do all of that stuff. Yeah. So that just all of those employees belong to somebody else, and I don't have to manage them.
It's kind of nice.
It is. Managing yourself and just as a limited crew is a much easier way to do it.
That's the same thing with where I'm at in my deal now. I had assistants, and I had too many horses to ride and train, and and going, and I think there was a point where I had to be that busy to get enough knowledge, to be proficient at my job. I had to know enough. I had to have met enough horses, trained enough horses to know a good one from a bad one, and a talented one from a not so talented one, and decipher the difference. Right. I had to get some kind of discernment, and discernment's really kind of earned. It's not just like, well, they just give it to you.
Well, it's some of both, though, because honestly, for you to be where you are, you had to have been the upper 1% of natural ability with it in the first place, but you had to find what that was. You still have to. We all have natural abilities, but they still have to be discovered. They're not like natural and given to you what they are at the same time. So
yeah, no, I think that I think there's definitely you know, I have a way with horses, or I have I have that desire, I have that in me, right? And I see that in some of my kids. You know, my youngest one, she really is, she likes them and really is enjoying them. She's a horse kid, and I don't think my oldest son, I don't think you could make him a horse kid. And it's not there, right? Yeah. And I see that, but I think to get the reference of knowledge, I think you have to go so big at some part, right. And then you hit a part in your life where you kind of like, okay, so now I've done that, and really all I've done is answer more phone calls and push more papers and do more things and keep myself more busy, because I didn't really make that much more money or anything like that. I just had bigger bills and more stuff going in and out the door, to eventually get to a point where it's kind of nice when you go like, oh, I just meant to make it simple and just rely on myself.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you're very fortunate to do something that you love and you're passionate about.
Yeah,
and that's really a small. I mean, there's people, the numbers, they say 70% of people enjoy their job, but really people who are like passionate about what to do is in the 1 or 2 percentile. It's not very many people who are just if you talk to them. After you finish talking to him, you're like, I want to be a veterinary pathologist, what I mean? Because they're like really excited about it, and it's very fortunate. I mean, you're fortunate that you've kind of found that thing that you're excited about. And for me, was such a crazy system that got me to pathology in the first place. And it's like what my brain was designed to do, and so I love it, and it's just solving puzzles in my head all day. And that's, when I was in school, grade school, I had serious dyslexia and learning disabilities and problems. And they sent me to the special school and all that. And they would like, test me and do all these things. Like, oh, hey, you're not stupid, which was good for me to hear when I was in the 3rd grade. That you're not stupid. There's a mismatch between your ability and your performance. And so I kind of really held on to that as a kid. Okay, I'm not stupid, I just can't learn the way they're learning it. And so they would actually have me like do puzzles and solve puzzles, and I could solve any of those little things at Buc-ee's, those little horseshoe puzzle. Those are like simple for me. It's always
really
happening. And so so then to go through kind of my life, I mean, even going to vet school was really kind of the Lord telling me, hey, you're gonna go to vet school. I'm like, okay, and then like through each step of it, and then getting into pathology, where it's a whole job where my entire purpose in life is to solve puzzles, and that's like what my brain's totally defective, but but it's perfect, but it's next level at solving problems. And so then I found a profession to where it's all I do all day is I just add up this fact and this fact and this fact and say, oh, that's this, So I was very fortunate.
That's really cool. That's I think that's a crazy deal that, well, I think the 1%, the 1%er, is almost the one that realized they could, I mean, just thinking about, had somebody not said that to you, had they not taken the time to, they put you in the other class and they, and you didn't have that person tell you, no, you're like, you're not, that's not it, then, I think we run around with such labels, and we can label ourselves, right? We talked about that before, or I've said that before, about names are so important, right? Yeah. Names are so important, and when you're labeling or telling somebody, or that even with your kids, it's so important what you say, and I don't know, our Creator does the same thing, right? There's an importance of why he calls himself a father, right? I mean, he refers to himself that way, but I don't know. That's kind of cool though that somebody took, that and that you recognized it, right?
Yeah, well, and that's what it is, because our life is full of tons of labels, and everybody else puts them out there, and we get to accept some of them, and decline some of them. And so lots of people told me I was stupid. I mean, probably 100 times more people told me I was stupid than the guy that told me, you're not stupid. And my mom always really believed in me, and
those moms are good, aren't they?
That I was. I mean, and she even like convinced me that I was special.
Yeah.
Everybody said I was special, but she didn't mean special ed. She meant the real special. So, but it really, that's what life is. We become the labels that we accept. That people are putting on us.
Boy, that's profound. We are what the labels that we accept.
Yeah.
Because you have the choice of accepting that too, right? I remember and I process it different. I remember being told one time that when I was starting out, I really wanted to, I was like, man, I can't wait. I want to be a horseman. I want to be a horse trainer. Right? That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to ride horses. I'm going to train horses. And I remember a guy one time, I heard through a friend, and I considered the guy a friend. I guess maybe not, but he, they came back and then said, hey, so-and-so says you're just a wannabe, right? And then, and I could have accepted it, or I could have, what my decision of what to do with that was my decision, right? And my response, and I think it's like a little bit of my own, the way I think of things and the way I do things. I'm kind of defiant. And it works. Sometimes it works in my favor, and sometimes it doesn't. And my first reaction right back was, "I'm not a wannabe. I'm a gonna be, and you'll watch." Yeah. And it was almost like what lit my fire even more. They're like, "Oh man, you just watch, right? Yeah. Let me show you what I am." And I think certain people react that certain way too. And you can accept that, but it's accepting that label.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was for me. Like high school, I was, 15, 16 is when I really started riding horses and really got involved in horses. And we had moved from northern Oklahoma to southern Oklahoma to this 1,500 person town, Tishomingo, Oklahoma. And most of my high school class had been together since kindergarten. It was like 40 out of 53 of us, or 56 of us, whatever the number had been there since grade school all the way up to high school. And so I wasn't really accepted. And, some new people would come into town, but they were like stud football players, and so they were accepted, and some were just, handsome, they're just somehow they stood out. They were book smart, where at least they fit into the smart group,
right.
And I couldn't read out loud, so I didn't fit in the smart group.
That's terrible.
I might could have done it, but I just the reading thing is what people see of your intelligence.
Isn't it terrible? So, to be called out to read out loud, it was always such a like I could feel my body just start to boil.
Yeah, I mean, I totally in, and if that wasn't bad enough already, I mean, honestly, my freshman year in high school, the English teacher were reading some play or something, and I was still. All the way through middle school and grade school, I was in special classes, and so I was reading C. Dick Throw the Ball. I mean, and I had some great, like, the LD teachers were amazing, and they were supportive, but it really didn't, like, set me on this path to, like, catch up. It, like, held me at third grade reading level until I finally said, no, I can't, I need to go into regular school. I mean, I've literally sat in the office instead of going to class, because I wouldn't go to the LD classes anymore.
Really?
And so then they put me in, and now I have to read Shakespeare. So I went from C. Dick Throw the Ball to Shakespeare. And the teacher said, here, Scott, you read this part. It was a small part, but one of the guys there in my class was like, don't let him read. He's a retard, and that was a long time ago, and it's still pretty fresh, right?
Yeah.
And, and so I was, I mean, that, it's a tough struggle for me when I went into high school and I started riding horses, and I had that same thing. I started, immediately you know, because you're poor, so you start riding stupid horses, you know, almost immediately. And I think, blessed with the ability to know the difference between a stupid horse and a horse that's been done stupid, you know.
Yeah.
And so I could see a horse and say, yeah, I can do something with that horse, and I was never really wrong. So to me, that was something natural that was inside me that allowed me to know what was a broken horse versus a horse that was not right. You know, we know those horses are out there.
They are there.
My dad bought this Appaloosa once that almost killed me like 3 times because that thing was stupid. He was just retarded, you know.
It's so funny. Dad's buying stuff. First horse my dad bought me was a little Shetland pony, and her name was Babe, and she about tried to kill me, like to take me off on a couple of different trees and whatever else. And the second horse my dad bought me was, and I was like, my second horse, I was like, I think I was like 9, something like that, and he bought me a paint stud. And if that wasn't bad enough, the third horse we got was when we bred the Shetland pony to be a pet stud. That was my third horse. So now you know, like I was surrounded by stupid for a while. But
yeah, through high school, I started getting into horses, started breaking horses, and my parents bought this 14, 15-month-old appendix registered, you know, shell out racehorse because the feet all pointed different directions, you know, and so his registered name was Crazy Legs Pete because every foot pointed a different direction, and
that they took the time to register with.
And well, he was fast. I mean, because we got him, and he'd also got into a fence and got all cut up, and I mean, it was all scars by the time we bought him, but he'd been. That was kind of my first real horse to like break and train, and so I worked with him. And there was a horse training program at the local junior college, and we sent him out there for a semester, and the kid there really kind of more messed him up than fixed him. Yeah. And so then I got him back, and that was like my true lifetime horse, Crazy Legs Pete. And that horse was, I could do anything. I mean, and I like even had like a trick routine that I would do at the local rodeos and stuff, because I could just set him at a lope. I could jump off of him, run across the other side of the arena, and jump back on him. And he's never, you know, he just
never miss a beat.
You know, he never, and he was awesome. He was also like the fastest horse in the county, and I had such a good time on him. And he would, I mean, it would, like the parades, I would usually stand up and, you know, stand up in the saddle and ride, you know, right down through the middle of the parade with everything crazy going on, everything. But then that actually became an identity for me whenever, you know, sports and you know, intelligence and looks and all that stuff couldn't be. Right. But I did have, you know, some people are like, what could you even know? You're just a kid, you know, but you know, I was able to do it. I was able to kind of listen and hear, you know, the horses and understand what to do with them. So horses saved me. I mean, I think the reason I am a doctor and, you know, own a couple businesses and you know, it's basically, you hate to describe yourself as successful, but the reason I am, really, I tie it back to that time to where, you know, I was on the pommel. I could have fallen off to the left or fallen off to the right. And I really think the horses are what, you know, really got me through that time and said, oh, there's something different about you. There's something, you know, successful. Whatever people are saying doesn't really matter. And when it came to a horse, nobody could best me either. So, you know, that was, it was such an important thing. And honestly, I own 2 horses now. I told you they're completely rotten. But it's because I feel I owe this debt to horses for my life, you know. So I feed a couple of horses. they're barely rideable. They're beautiful, you know. They're great pasture statues. They're really good at what they do, which is stand in the pasture. But I really just keep them because it's just I feel a debt to horses, and so that's
it's funny. I feel kind of the same way about. Like getting to share, like I love to share with people about, you know, like how, like we were talking earlier, just, you know, like how they work and how they operate. And for someone who's not been around horses or not done anything, it's almost like blows their mind that you can do all those things, right? That you actually communicate with them, and that it's a relationship, and that it's not just, some, stock that you drag around kind of deal, but that there's actually interaction and a communication through them. And that's where I think a lot of times parents miss the boat on why we show horses, why we take these kids to go and teach them how to ride, and we're gonna, whatever your discipline is. I mean, it could be barrel racing, it could be, pick up sticks. I don't know. Doesn't matter what it is, right? But whatever it is that you're doing with the horse, it's not what you're doing with the horse. It's what you're using the horse to teach the kid, and like opening doors, like opening their minds to create, like how it all works. Like there's so much truth in creation. I think it's just fascinating, right? And get to share that with people. That it and why do you send your kid over here to come and ride, and once, twice a week, and what you're doing? It's like, man, I'm not investing in that horse. I'm investing in the kid, right? And the struggles is just as important as the success of winning in the show pen. Like I want to win too, right? I mean, I'm all about winning, but at the same time, like, what's the big win? The big win is that we got through to your kid, and we got we moved to the next level. That's what they lend so much to. Right.
And I do think the horse is an amazing device for that.
Yeah.
For some kids showing that they just don't got it. That's not their device, But
Yeah.
for many kids, and that's why I think, as therapy horses and with kids with special needs and those kind of things, why horses can be so, because we think that just walking is easy when you take somebody just kind of the spasticness between your brain and your legs, and you could get on a horse and do this, and it goes all the directions just smoothly. It really is a great device to kind of, show people that they can, you can do things that you didn't think you could do. And it's just, when you got something that outweighs you by 10 times, it's just real easy as a kid to sit on a horse and understand that it's work, but it's also kind of power. And when you take someone who's been powerless their whole life, and they can sit on 1,000 pounds of horse, that's awesome. That they can do it.
Huh. That's pretty cool. That's really something that's how much of an impact it had on you and on what what you've accomplished and what you've done. That's fascinating. I'm still keep going back to the eye. The eye's so crazy. Cool. So you do all different species too. So you do, I think you said once about, that you had even worked on an alligator not too recently.
Yeah, I did. Well, it was a caiman, which is a type of the same crocodile family. Yeah. But yeah, it was, I've done just about everything. I mean, my list of things I haven't done is getting much shorter than the things that I have. So, that's to me, it's just fortunate. Just been in the right place and had the right relationships, and the willingness to do it. I mean, I'm kind of an oddball. I mean, there's only 1,500 pathologists in the world, veterinary pathologists, and there's probably only one or two of them that's willing to get in his truck and drive to Waco to cut up a giraffe, and I've done that, and so
really, so there's only 1,500, about that many,
in the whole world.
Wow.
So it's not. I mean, that's why most people have never heard of a veterinary pathologist, because there's just they're not that many of us. And when you think, most of them are certainly in the U.S., but when you get into research, I mean, especially diagnostic wise, there's way more diagnostic pathology in the U.S., but there's lots of it in Europe and England and even India and places. I mean, they still do it. It's just the level here in the U.S. is the highest. So, but we have, it's not something you come across every day, but it is, it's something that it's easy to explain to people, because a lot of people hear it and they're like, what is that? It's real easy to say, well, if they cut a tumor off your dog, they send it to a veterinary pathologist, not a human pathologist. So it's easy to explain to somebody that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But then the fact that I travel around and do autopsies and things, and that's always the question: why in the world do people do autopsies? I'm like, well, everybody wants to blame somebody. So it was the neighbor's fault. It was the veterinarian's fault. It was the pet sitter's fault. It was the boyfriend's fault. It was somebody else's fault. They always want to blame somebody. sadly, a lot of times what they learned was the dog, died of heartworms, and it was your fault because you didn't give it the medicine. But not always. I mean, just sometimes that's how it goes. But there's everybody always kind of wants. That's kind of the first reason that people do it, and then the second one is a lot of herd health. So I do a lot of these high fence, exotic deer and sable antelope and that kind of stuff. Well, that's completely herd health. You got a $60,000 animal and you got a whole pen of them. You want to know why it died, and so I do that.
That would make a lot of sense, because just for the fact of like disease control and virus control, and I know that I had one of a clients quite a few years back that they raised a lot of white-tailed deer, and I remember them having a problem with all of a sudden the babies were all they were dropping like flies, and they were having a really hard time keeping them alive, and a lot of the bottle babies were really having a hard time with them. I could see where that would make a big difference. Yeah. That's your livelihood,
Yeah, and that, to me, that makes the most sense, because I'm just kind of a poor farm boy, country boy, and so that makes total sense. Herd health totally makes sense. Some of the other things, I just want to know, I mean, I honestly this one time did an 8-year-old pet rabbit, and they called me on the phone and they said, well, I got to tell you the whole story. So my local veterinary school, or local junior college I went to, has a vet tech program. So I'd advertised to the San Antonio veterinarians, hey, does anybody have any kind of veterinary equipment that you'd be willing to donate to this vet tech program? Because they didn't have a lot of equipment. And so one of the clinics all the way south side of San Antonio, Amigo Animal Hospital, they said, we have this ultrasound machine. It's like a roll-around ultrasound machine. It works great, but we have a new one, so you're welcome to this one. And so I'm like, great. So I go down there to get it. And it's like 250 pounds on this cart, and it's me and the girls from the clinic trying to put it in the back of my truck. Well, the phone rings. And so I say to the girls, okay, y'all going back inside. We'll load this up in a second. And this guy calls me. He's like, I have this rabbit, and I want an autopsy. And I'm like, well... do you have a bunch of rabbits? No, I just have the one rabbit. Do you have, is it like young? No, it was 8. Pet rabbits don't live to 8. Okay?
Yeah.
and I'm like, it's probably, because I like try to talk people out of stuff all the time, because I'm just, that farm boy inside me is still. It doesn't
make a lot of sense to spend that money.
And so he's like, no, we just want to know. I'm like, okay, well, I'm, at this veterinary clinic. Oh, well, I live in the apartment building behind that veterinary clinic. But it's just crazy that it was that, because it's all the way south side of San Antonio. I never go that far down there usually. Yeah. And so 90 seconds later, he comes walking around the corner with the rabbit, and the guy is like 250-pound like bodybuilder. And so I take the rabbit. I take the cash. I'm sadly, when I do a person directly, I have to pay cash, because I don't want to deal with billing. Private. I'll bill veterinary clinics, but billing private people doesn't work. And I'm like, hey, could you help me put this machine in this truck? And he's like, sure. But then I noticed he had like a Marine Corps tattoo, and so I'm like, well, military discount, you get $50 off. So I gave him some of his money back. But it was so funny how things go that way. And ever since I started doing pathology, it like goes like that so many times. Like I'll be driving through Austin and I'll have an autopsy in Austin, or I'll be it just like even yesterday they called me for an autopsy in Austin. I wasn't able to get up there, and so I sent someone else to pick the animal up for me, and then I would have gone up there and done it and come back, and then I got another call from Austin from the same clinic with another animal, and so I just had the courier pick up both of them and bring them back to me. And so it just goes like that for me all the time, and I always just credit the Lord for it, because I just think my life is way too many things go like that in my life for me for it not to be some outside source of guiding things. I think so.
My whole life has been that. That's really kind of crazy. If I tried to make sense of it or try to recreate it, people are like, oh, how did you do it? Like, I don't know if you want to do it my way. There was a lot of intervention, to get me where I was at. But I guess probably that's really cool. But then also you think about like, just the consequences of death. right? Like what that brings to mind. I was just thinking about that, big bodybuilder with the bunny rabbit, and wanting to know, his answer to, why his bunny rabbit died. But it is really revealing how people do want to blame on that, but then also just coming to the understanding that, I don't know, I was telling some friends of mine about, the beginning of the whole pandemic and everything, and it was, and people really freaking out and stuff. And I don't know, dealing in livestock and, and being country boys and around all that kind of stuff, you are dealing with death on a fairly regular basis. I mean, it's a fact of life. And when you are dealing with death on a regular basis, it forces you to contemplate, your mortality. And you need to come to terms with some of that stuff. It becomes something that is a little more prominent on your mind. And you see it often, and you see the effects of it. I mean, it's a crazy deal to watch livestock die and watch people die. I mean, it's disturbing, and there's a smell to it, and there's a whole lot of other stuff to it. And I see that people that live in town don't experience it. Yeah. Rarely, if ever, Yeah, I mean,
that's even like reproduction, all that stuff. I mean, I just think animals have living around farm animals, there's so much education about life.
It really is. It's so much. It's so much truth in creation. Yeah. Right. I mean, like, you just can't deny it. I mean, like, none of us out here on the farm are questioning what a female is right now. Yeah. I mean, are there deviations from the norm? Hey, sure, there's deviate, but what does that talk to you about? Well, that kind of talks to you about, the fall of creation, right? It speaks to, we all can look at that and say that that's not the norm. And that doesn't mean that, I don't like that piece of livestock, or that it just means that it's not the norm, right? And it speaks to, the fall of creation. It just tells you something about it, right? And that's a sad deal that I see, and we're trying to deny truth, in creation. Yeah. What is real, instead of contemplating it. And I think that, and those buddies of mine, I told them, it's like, crazy part about that is that in my industry, we lost a dog that year. We lost, because we have a lot of livestock around here. I lost one of my really good, which was going to be a calf horse. A really good horse, really cool horse, and just boom, colitis, like boom, dropped him dead, quick, and it stung, man. I mean, it stung, but my kids had to contemplate it, right? I mean, it stinks, but it's a blessing too that we get to have those conversations.
Yeah. Well, I even, as a veterinarian, I've actually had people, they talk to me, they want to get a pet for their, their kids or something. And a regular thing that people will bring to me, which I think if you live on the farm, this is like nothing somebody would ever say. It was more somebody who's not had that background. They'll say to me, well, we have, it just seems like it'd be so sad if the pet dies, that the parent, that the child will have to deal with the death of the pet. And so I'm like, okay, so what's better? That they learn to deal with death first from a cat or a dog or from grandma? I mean, it's just, that's a natural part of life. You're not going to protect them from death. So why not teach them the process of life? You're a puppy and you need a lot of care. Then you come through your destructive puppy phase, that needs a lot of, protection of the house. You wish you'd kill him. And then they're protecting you for all of this time. And then they just go into this downward slope to where they want to protect you. And then, and then they can't. And then it comes to the very end to where you feel like, what's the right thing to do here? And that's another thing I tell owners is that pets, we have these memories of our pets. And there's a point in the end where you're keeping the pet around. And it's going to be, the only memories you have is cleaning up poop because the dog couldn't go outside anymore. And, it gets to the point that it's going to corrupt your 12 years of positive memories are going to be corrupted by that end time. And that's when you have to, do the right thing. And it's, a lot of people don't even, they'll say they want to be a veterinarian, but then they're like, oh, but I could never, euthanize a pet, and But then in my experience, there was a little bit of time early in my career when I had some shelter medicine and stuff where we had to euthanize like healthy dogs. And so that sucks. I mean, absolutely across the board, that sucks. But they couldn't find a home. They were aggressive, I kind of, and I managed to fix that. At the place that I worked at, where by the time I left, we weren't doing any more of that, but it's hard. But other than that, my entire career since 1992, so we're talking 30 years now this year, I always felt like I was very proud of the service that I provided to the family and to that pet, and it's life, and I think your kids need to learn that, and so I think it's a good part of life to see that whole phase of life, not just even the death, but the whole phase of life.
Yeah.
And no better way to learn that from kids. I mean, for your kids to learn that than from pets.
I agree. I agree completely. And just, I mean, there's so much to learn from them, and, obviously, I like the horse end of things even more. Although I do have, we just bought, man, I tell you what, sometimes I really ought to question myself. But a couple of days ago, the first part of this week, I bought 5 bottle baby calves. And I bought them with the intention of, I'm going to get these kids, I'm going to show them all I'm going to get these kids out here fit. I remember when I was a kid, I had to bottle baby, all these calves and stuff. And I am working my butt off getting bottle feeding them all and keeping them from the scours. And oh my gosh, I've been running, and they're all, but there's so much to it. There's so much great stuff to it that, them just the fact I'm like, nothing's dying, not yet, but all of them are doing well and whatever, but just wrestling a calf to make him eat because he's gonna die if he doesn't know how, and they don't know how to suck at this point on a bottle. It's not the same nipple as a mama, and they've gone a couple of days and whatever, and we're out there wrestling these little calves, and there's this one of those little heifers is strong, man. And she will run from you, and she'll suck that bottle down, but boy, you got to wrestle her to get her. And them, their frustration in it, and and they're doing the right thing, but they don't want to do the right thing because it's such a struggle for them. And there's so many valuable things to learn from that. That I it's a shame that that so many live with that disconnect. Right. And just like that opportunity that your dad did with you and got you a horse, and just what it opened up your reality to.
Well, and it's and I'll be in trouble for telling this, but when my wife and I, we started dating, it just shows that how much of a disconnect between the two worlds can be, right? So my wife had always, she wasn't exactly a city girl. I mean, she was Stillwater, Oklahoma, 40,000 people, so not big metropolis, but mostly. And they lived kind of in a house in the country and stuff. And they'd had lots of pets and everything. But we bring her home. This is like we just started dating. And I bring her home, and my dad had this stud horse. And this stud horse was the most polite breeding horse you've ever seen in your life. I mean, it was a thing of beauty. I mean, and so, because he would have the mare on a halter, but the stud, he would just leave free. And he would just tell him what to do. And so he would bring the mare in, and he'd say, "Okay, let's see if she's ready." And and she would come over and nibble on her neck and stuff, and you could tell if she was gonna kick, and if she was ready. And he's like, "Say, you stand over there," and the horse would go, and he would just stand over. He may eat if there's hay, he'd eat hay. I mean, it was just like, business over here. I mean, he took him to rope-ins. He could do anything with this horse, and if he didn't have like a certain halter on and was told his breeding time, he was a gelding. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so he, and so then if she was ready, then we'd tie her tail, wrap her tail and clean her up and everything. And then, come over and breed, right? Well, to me, it was like poetry. I mean, it was so beautiful the way this horse, the way he acted, and just the way he just so polite and everything. Well, then, they actually breed. my poor life is sitting on the rail fence, and it's like, at this point, you can't really leave. I mean, what do you do? And it was just such a different world, because to me, it's like, that wasn't even weird. That wasn't even, you know, but to her,
she's blushing and ready to go
yeah,
inside.
exactly. So she's wanting to run for her life, but she's like sitting on the fence, so she really can't, you know. And so, yeah, that's it. And it was hard for me to even wrap my brain around that being an issue, you know. But I said I'll probably be in trouble for telling that. But she admits it's true. But
it is true. It is different though, right? I mean, you take some of those things as just part of life, and you know you're not looking at it as something perverted or anything. It's just
sex,
like
breeding,
it's breeding them, and there we go. Yeah, that is kind of wild though. And that's what I think. What I want to do a lot with what I have here has been to open it up to other youth groups to come out and talk about like the structure of the horse and how it relates to the skeletal structure of a human, and you know what are the similarities, and you know is that hoof the same as you? It's like the same thing as your fingernail, and the way that it's but it's just amazing how it's made, and the amount of weight that one fingernail carries, and all of those things it's just incredible, and then you go into something like the eyeball that is just like mind-blowing. I think those things are really, really cool. I can't get off the eagle's eye. Look, that just is fascinating.
Well, that's why to me, the eye is actually not like your kidney is like one organ, your liver is one organ, even your lungs, but the eye is like nerves, and it's like glands, and it's like, collagen. It's actually like a whole body. It's almost like everything that the whole body has is all in the eye. It's that little contained thing. And so, and like I said, just how in the heck, we're trying so hard to make computers that can kind of understand things, and our eye can take light and turn it into thought. That's like, so much more than we can get with computers. That day will come, and certainly computers can like recognize things and stuff now, but it's such a different level than taking light and making it into electricity and making it into thought. And it's crazy.
Yeah, it's really kind of, it's one of those things that we can be in awe of, that little phone that's in your hand, and what all it does and what it can do. Because it does a bunch of stuff, right? But we're not in awe of creation and what it has. It's amazing, and it's like so far beyond advanced than what that is. That it's ridiculous.
The simplest thing. That's what I love. God takes earth, wind, and fire. He takes the simplest things, and water, and can bring us to our knees. He could just take the simplest element. It is oxygen and hydrogen, and we just we can build these things that we think are just
atomic
unbelievable,
bomb,
it's just like water defeats it all. And
it's amazing.
It really is, and we want to try to give ourselves credit for everything, and we still just the simplest things of God are beyond all of it.
God, yes. I had. Have you diagnosed a lot of horses or seen a lot of EPM?
Not much. And the biggest reason being more that this area, certainly there's horses in this area, but we're not in Kentucky, right. It's, and so, and then by the time, it gets to the end, because I'm mostly doing on horses, it's mostly autopsies. I get some biopsies, from time to time. But in horses, if usually by that time they've kind of done the titers and everything, and the horse has got the right neurologic symptoms, and so they know what it is. And occasionally, if it's an insured horse, then the insurance says, okay, we want proof that was what it actually was. And so I just don't do a ton of horse autopsies.
I've had over the past quite a few years, I've had several experiences with EPM, and it was kind of wild. I had one a little while back. But where oddly enough, one of the best horses that I had come down with EPM after his big futurity, and he went downhill, and it was kind of a big ordeal. And then there was like a gap for like 5 years where I didn't see a horse with EPM hardly at all. And even at Retama and talking to some of the other vets and stuff, and they're like, no, we hadn't seen it. We hadn't seen it around. We hadn't, but it was during the drought. Mm-hmm. And when we started getting rain again, it like came back like crazy, mm-hmm. right? And so when it came back, I saw it kind of run through my barn, and I just saw it a lot, and the vets were seeing it like crazy. Mm-hmm. And but there was one instance where I had one that came out, and I was talking to the lady, and we were talking about like the swirlology of a horse, right? And the swirls, and if they have one swirl in the middle between their eyes and their forehead, mm-hmm. then the old wives' tale was that it was a smart horse, and if it was dead between the eyes, it was great, right? But if it had multiple swirls, like run, because it was a nut, right? And there's other ones like the swirls that come up on the pole, like by the mm-hmm. pole. If they're balanced, if they're in the same area, or if one's way down the neck and one's way up high, then it was going to be more left brain, right brain, whatever. And there's different ones, and the swirls on the chest and all kinds of stuff. And we were just, talking about that, right? Mm-hmm. And I had read that at the same time as the embryo is developing, and it's forming the central nervous system, at the same time that the hair is being formed and those swirls. So it was correlating it between the central nervous system and the swirls would tell you if there was any abnormalities in the central nervous system. Oh, come on, that's kind of fun. It's kind of, it'd be kind of fascinating, and there maybe there was something to it, maybe it wasn't, right? But it was just an observation that it was being developed at the same time. And I had a horse that was here, and we started riding it, whatever. Me and the lady were talking, and we were talking about the swirls and stuff. And I said, that I've had a couple horses over the years that I've seen that had like almost like a big cowlicks on their necks, and if they had the big cowlick and the hair was going the wrong direction or whatever else, man, those were really kind of hard horses. Like I couldn't get them past certain things, and I just noticed that it was the horses with the cowlicks on them. And I looked down, I'm riding her horse, I looked down, sure enough, it had cowlicks on its neck. And I'm like, oh, well, but, maybe not your horse. Surely not. I'm not going to talk myself out of work. So it was silly. Later on, we did a blood boost and drew some blood on him and run a titer test on him. And he had, like, I think his titer count was like 750 or something like that. And so we were like, that he's got it. And so, and oddly enough, her husband's a veterinarian, and so she ran the test, whatever else, and we treated him. She took him home, she treated him and stuff, and then we got him back up here to start getting him going again, because we wanted to kind of like help, develop the neurological connections again through training and stuff, and and I started riding him, and he looked so much better. Like when he came back, he just looked like a better horse, right? And I rode him for about 3 weeks, and he looked markedly, I couldn't figure out what it was that looked different, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there's a couple of factors, right? But he looked much better. And I got off, and I've been riding for about 3 weeks, and I got off him one day, and I was like, his cowlicks are gone. Mm. Like, seriously, and she had taken pictures of it. Mm-hmm. And I took a picture of it, and I sent it to her, and I was like, his cowlicks are gone. That's what it is. That's what's different. And I've seen it. I had another mare that was doing the same thing. She didn't have EPM, but when after they treated that horse, that the cowlicks went away, and this other mare, she was having a trouble with her knee, and we were going through it, and I wanted to treat her for EPM because there was a couple of different things, but she had that cowlick running up her neck, right? Mm-hmm. Well, then I started to realize she was doing a couple of funny things whenever I get ready to get on her and ride her. Mm-hmm. And I got her knee taken care of. And as soon as I took care of her knee, that cowlick down her neck went away. And it was almost like a grimace or a cringe, right? Where they're holding their skin tight because they can move their skin. Right. And that's what that cowlick was.
Yeah, it's almost like a superficial muscle spasm.
Yeah, and just like a growl or almost like a flinch. And one of the signs, or I guess, one of the signs of a possible EPM is one nostril being higher than the other, mm-hmm. is one of the observations. And it's almost like almost like a scowl or a grimace of the face too, right?
Yeah.
That was fascinating.
That is fascinating. And you know, I think there's something to a lot of that stuff. And you know, pretty much starting in like late 1800s, 1900s, medicine became what they call evidence-based. Where medicine was all basically designed on, okay, you do an organized study, you know, you try to thing. And so most of your medicine, as far as for drugs and everything like that, is all evidence-based, where they've done a controlled study and they know, okay, we gave these people sugar pills, we gave these people this pill, and it made a difference. And so that's evidence-based medicine. Before that was anecdotal medicine. And that's, and to the extent, so anecdotal is, well, my uncle had COVID and he died, so it's bad in my family, you know, or whatever, you know, and it's just, it's just like these random little facts and things like this. It's observational, but without the follow-through study. A lot of what's happened, the problem is now, is evidence is like, well, it has to be evidence-based or it absolutely doesn't count. And, you know, the Chinese were diagnosing diabetes 6,000 years ago. They would have a person pee on a rock, and if it drew ants, they knew that they had diabetes, and they treated it with acupuncture.
Get out.
Yeah. You're 6,000 years ago. And so, you know, we try to act like, you know, everything that doesn't have like a clear study doesn't really matter. But really, in truth, you kind of need to consider both. I mean, you need to, and in cases to where you can do a controlled study, you need to, and let it be evidence-based, and then it can become common practice. But if it's, you know, observational or anecdotal type stuff, can be dangerous, you know, because, you know, you can just make up anything, you know, like, you know, I play Frisbee golf all the time, and every time I'm close to the basket, I always put it in with my left hand and say I've never missed a left-handed putt, you know, so I'm 100% with my left-handed putts. But, you know, that's how statistics and facts can lie as well. So even the evidence base can be, you know, can be messed up.
Well, it depends on who's gathering the evidence too.
But it is but I think you do a mistake when you say anything that hasn't been proven by science doesn't exist. I mean, that's like saying God doesn't exist. You know, that's what we do. You know, we don't accept. And so, you know, I think there's, you know, 100% could be easily a neurological process that would explain if there's something wrong with your nervous system, that you're, you know, having, you know, cowlicks or some, you know, different hair patterns. And it makes total sense.
Yeah.
And never really heard about swirlology, you know, before, but I think you do have to be both.
Yeah.
And I think some people, like right now with all the vaccines and everything, people want to go, you know, 100% to the anecdotal and completely ignore all science, because all science is bad, and that's a problem, you know. But it's also to go, only science matters. Science is it. You know, that's broken too. You know, we got to find that middle place. And
you can't discount one over the other. I mean, they're both, you know. We have to have both, right? I mean, if not, we're not going to go we're not going to get any further with it, you know.
Exactly.
If you're not at least using anecdotal to find out where to do the scientific study,
that's right.
You know, I mean, like, you have to know where to start,
right? And because otherwise, what you do is you have a conclusion in mind, and then you start into science to prove your conclusion. That's a little bit broken, you know. So I mean, you can have a theory, but you can't have a conclusion. So
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. I enjoyed that. Yeah. I enjoyed that is a job that I had not considered at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know, just some cool things to contemplate about it. I think it's important for other people to see and know the importance of sports, the importance of horses, or like livestock, and the purpose and the things that it can be taught with your kids, what it opens up your minds to. But even just like somebody like you, who, you know, allowing somebody else to dictate who it is that you are or what you are created for, right? And finding other ways and realizing that through creation or through investing in that kid or investing in that person, like, you know, how are you going to find that true calling? I always joke that I think I've had like every job under the sun before I became a horse trainer. I was even a weatherman in the Air Force.
Awesome.
I did everything, right? Exotic game handler. I was like, worked as a welder. I'm like everything under the sun before I found horses. And you know, I was a late bloomer and took to it way later than most guys did. But it was that background of learning all those other jobs, of what not to do, what I didn't want to do, that made me really good at what I did.
Well, and you know, this is so in the military. So my last 8 years in the military, I worked at the Institute of Surgical Research, and so the Army Hospital here in San Antonio, the burn center is what everybody knows, but it's actually the burn center is part of Institute of Surgical Research. So I worked there while we were in 2 wars. We were in Iraq and Afghanistan both. And like the soldiers used to be told, hey, take a rag and a stick. You know, if somebody's bleeding, you're supposed to make this tourniquet, you know, out of a rag and a stick, you know, and somebody's like, hey, why don't we give them a tourniquet, you know? And so, but that had to be designed and developed and tested and everything.
That's
and
right.
So,
I forgot about the fact that you did that.
Yeah. So I was part of that, and like all of these blood stock products, you know, they you know, we had to use animal models to say which one works best, and you know, rule that down to kind of just, you know, the 1 or 2 products that the military ended up buying. And so that's a where was I going with that?
I don't know. So the blood stop stuff that I use in my for my horses that I can get at the vet store, is that the same thing as the blood stop that you use?
Could be. Because a lot of those products are similar. They're all kind of
clotting agent of some
clotting agent, right? And so, because basically we were still using. For the soldiers, we were still using cotton gauze, which again, they think the Egyptians probably were the first people to use cotton gauze to make people stop bleeding. So technology didn't change for, 6,000 to 8,000 years. And finally someone's like, hey, you know, maybe it would be better because, you know, there's a lot of things that make you bleed. I mean, bleeding makes you bleed, but then when you bleed a certain amount, you run out of clotting factors. But drop your temperature 3 or 4 degrees and your clotting factors don't work. And so, if somebody's injured, they get cold, you know, and so with the products, they're able to basically make your blood clot no matter what, you know, and it's really saved a ton of lives. It's been really kind of a total game changer, you know, for what it has done for the soldiers to have these between the tourniquets and the blood stock products.
So when you were developing the type of tourniquets that to use and what not to use and how it worked and what it that's fascinating.
Well, and I don't want to get too much credit for it because basically I was the guy. They're using animal models, so they're the ones that designed them and everything. I was just part of the research, you know, helping to say this one worked better than this one, and it caused this kind of damage, and you know, there's all sorts of things because everybody has these ideas, right? And so we're trying to go from the idea to, you know, to a product, and that's where I know where I was going now. That's where it was this unique because my dad's a carpenter, so I was raised doing construction, you know, and my dad won't touch a piece of wire laying on the ground. I mean, he knows it'll shock him, you know? And so, whereas my mom could wire houses, you know, and when I was growing up, if the washer broke, my mom fixed it. And I literally always thought it was a joke that the Maytag man was always like bored because they didn't have anything to do. It was supposed to mean that Maytags never broke. But I thought it was because everybody's mom fixed the washer. And so I really did think that when I was a kid. But so I go into these meetings with these brilliant people in you know, doing the research through the military. And these people are like so much smarter than me. I mean, you know, intellectually, book-wise, academically, way ahead of me.
Yeah.
But they all address this problem in the box because they all learned in the box. They were all like really successful, smart people throughout the whole process. And I'm, you know, a carpenter and a veterinarian and a scientist. And so like I look at the same problem and I would say, well, why don't we do it this way? And they've regularly thought I was like genius because the ideas but it had nothing to do with how smart it was. It was just that my process came through the different things that I did and the work that I did, even with horses and everything else. And just, you know, understanding animals differently, you know, I mean, even like in pigs, like some of the studies, and I know some people are, animal research, but I really felt my job in animal research was protecting those animals and making sure they were taken good care of and they weren't wasted. And so I
how
never,
else would you?
And I've had lots of people who protest against pigs, or animal research, and they're like, so what have you done? So you held a sign up, so you're against it. Yeah, still see you wearing leather shoes, but and that. But I'm like, I've dedicated my life to making sure the animals are treated right. So when you get to my level, come back and talk to me again.
Right.
Because people, they just have a cause and they, But anyway, so with these, with the animals, making sure that, or with these people, these ideas that I would come to were just very different. And it kind of goes back to that broken brain that I have, which is a blessing. It's like the best thing the Lord could have given me was this. And I didn't have, I'm not trying to take all the credit. I didn't have all the answers, but frequently my solutions to the problems were completely different than a group of 6 PhDs that were way smarter than me because of growing up with my dad doing construction, and understanding just, in orthopedic medicine is really just glorified carpentry, and so a lot of the research was like orthopedic research and stuff. And so it was just that I just naturally understand a lot of those things from those jobs. And so you had those jobs on purpose. And that's where I think so many people think that their life is an accident. And I just think that our life is just a series of processes that the Lord needs to take us through to get us to where he needs us to be today.
Oh, it's so true. It's crazy. I had one just the other day that actually the one that I was saying at the mare that had the cowlick up her neck, right? And she had a problem with her knee. And I noticed one of the shows, I was walking her back to the stall and there was kind of a slanted concrete, right? And she'd lost her front shoe on that leg that was kind of showing me that she had a problem. And then the farrier was telling me, you pull her foot back straight and she's fine. But when you pull it out to the side to like nail the shoe on, she's uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. And so I took note of that. And then she lost a shoe when we were showing, and I was walking her back on that slanted ground. And then the slanted ground, when it was slanted from, it was her left leg, left front. When the ground was slanted high on her left side, slanting down to the right, she darn near fell down, right? When walking, and she just really did not want to step that way with that shoe on. And so he gets talking to me to the farrier, and I was like, hey, how about, I think that her knee joint is, I think she's got some arthritis that's showing that must be giving her trouble on the outside of that joint, right? So my knee was giving me trouble 2 years ago, and I put a different, deal in my insole to put the arch to it, and it relieved the pain on I thought it was a meniscus tear, and it was actually just kind of like the way my knee was giving me trouble. And voila, my knee, I thought I was going to have a knee replacement there for a while. And now all of a sudden, I'm fine, right? And I told him, said, how about we trim her on the outside? How about we trim her up a little bit more on the outside of that foot and open, and then hopefully that would open that joint up on the knee more. And he goes, well, how about instead of doing that, we just put a little leather wedge on the inside. That way, if it doesn't work, we can pull that back out. I'm like, well, that's even smarter, right? And we did it. All of a sudden, the mare, when we get ready to hop on her to ride her, she would kind of like suck on her mouth like she'd nurse, and she'd salivate really bad. And then, it was showing up with the cowlick on her neck. And what if it was behavioral or whatever? Voila, man. We did that. And within 2 days, she's not salivating. She's not sucking her dick. And the cowlick went straight away off her neck. And it was just all discomfort. It was all, it was behavioral, but it was in response to discomfort, right? And she's just happy as a lark now. I mean, going around, but it's that. If my knee hadn't given me the trouble, if I hadn't had to put the insoles in and whatever else, I wouldn't have come to that conclusion. That's so fascinating stuff, right? Yeah. The things that you're given where you feel like, oh, and with the time when it was happening to me, I was like, all I could think about was like, golly, what? I can't believe my knee's going to go out and I'm going to be one broken down old man that can't.
Well, this is something I actually feel like the Lord gave this to me recently. And it's hard. And, anytime anybody's going through a hard time, the last thing you can say is, oh, this is on purpose. The Lord has a plan. The Lord, But I really think, in creation, we're studying, the beginning, Genesis at church. And so at the end of each day, God looked at it. You know, he just made darkness and light. And he's like, oh, it's good. You know? And like it is, it's, you know, every day. So he did it and it's good, you know? And honestly, you really think the earth was that impressive when it was this, oh, there's darkness and light? You know, it probably wasn't. But God knew what the picture, where it was going. You know, it's just like when somebody pours a slab and they can see a house. You know, that's what God did. God poured a slab and said, the house is going to be good. It's going to be good. And he made, you know, separated the oceans and the mountains, and he knows that there's going to be green grass on it and the animals, and it's good. You know, and so God knows the end picture. And so at the end of each day, he looked at it and he said, it's good. And what the Spirit said to me recently is that we, you know, no matter what happens to you today, I think at the end of the day, the Lord knows the picture at the end, and he says, it's good. It's good. And I think at the end of every day, the Lord says it's good. And he looks down on you and he says it's good. Even when you're limping and your knee hurts and it's because he knows
how he's going to use it.
He knows you're going to, right, exactly.
He knows the purpose in making it so that he knows that, you know, he has the end in mind, right? And we're so temporal, right? We're so like right now, and now like I'm dealing with whatever with my kids, or you know, like I'm having this trouble and it's like, man, it's so hard to look beyond where you're at and so much stuff and pick your head up and realize that, you know what, it might be just good. Yeah, you know.
I mean, some days it sucks. I mean, there's no way you can see it as good. You just have to, you know, trust sometimes.
It's like that I think that's the hard part as a kid, right? That when you're growing up and you're you know, stuck in a classroom where you're, you know, feeling less than and whatever else, it's hard to see the good in that, right? And like, how in the heck is he going to make this good, right? And look what he did, like that. And that's the cool thing. That's the thing that I think that kids need to see, right? They need to know, and they need to realize that, you know, it is good. It stinks at the time, and I know it does, you know, but
it never works to tell anybody that, but it's sure good to come to a point in life where you know it's true. You know? And that's where I am, and I know I'm going to have some suck days, you know, but I know God knows the end picture. So.
Yeah, and it's the ones like you that's gone through what you have that where people can find their encouragement from. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's where the struggles that kids are going through, and they're, you know, and we're dealing in adults too, right? I mean, all of us, you know, it's just being reminded, right? It was what we just talked about on Wednesday when we came out of the class, our Bible study on Wednesday. Mike was talking, and it was like, man, all I could think of was like thinking about how what was the it was in Romans 12:2. That renewing your mind daily, right? That after all of this and that's what he meant. That's what he means by, you know, renewing your mind daily, and it means aligning your thoughts with his, right? Not you know whatever your thoughts are, but realizing that, you know, the Creator is the one who's, you know, kind of in charge, and he's working in you. Like, you know, finding the, you know, okay, so I'm worthy enough to like torture a little bit today, so that might make something out of me. You know, the struggle is, you know, is worth the struggle, right? And it was worth those things because that's what he had in mind, you know, by the end of it. Yeah, that's cool. That is cool. Well, man, I enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, cool. We'll have to have you back out, especially whenever I start to figure out and have new questions. And like, you got me all thinking about the eyeball now. I'm gonna have to go like pick your brain on all these other different things.
Sounds cool. I'm all for it.
Cool. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Appreciate your time too. Cool.